Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of the Canadians in the frugal riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Recently, I asked the NDP Liberal coalition if they would adopt a dollar-for-dollar rule for this week's budget. It's a common-sense rule where government finds $1 in savings for every new dollar of spending. It allows government to focus resources where it's most needed without stalking inflation. The response from the President of the Treasury Board was embarrassing. More than embarrassing, it was sad and pathetic. Her response was the parliamentary equivalent of the classic schoolyard taunt, "I know you are, but what am I?" There's something about this so-called feminist prime minister's government which takes smart, accomplished, professional women in the private sector and turns them into shallow, glib bobblehead dolls in Parliament. If they're lucky, like Jane and Jody, they get out before the Prime Minister demands they shred their integrity. If they're unlucky, they work hard in a given portfolio only to be demoted when they start getting better press than the Prime Minister. I imagine that's why the President of the Treasury Board decided to ignore a policy question and reply with a lazy partisan attack. She needs to get back into the good graces of the inner circle. Any display of independent thought by any minister in this government risks bringing down the wrath of Katie. But falling in line and following orders is something the minister is especially skilled at. How else can we explain that someone could serve as defense minister, receive firsthand a look at the dire state of the military readiness, then go on to cut billions from defense budget? That's right, Madam Speaker. The President of the Treasury Board is leading a program review. They're cutting spending from national security priorities so they can increase spending on Liberal re-election priorities. It's not quite a dollar-for-dollar policy. It's more a borrowed $10 for a dollar policy, or more accurately, a borrowed $1 trillion. They've borrowed so much money that the cost to finance their mountain of debt is more than what we spend on health care. The interest payments are more than all the tax collected through the GST. Incredibly, as if to fulfill the prophecy of Oedipus Rex, this Prime Minister has done in 9 years what it took his father 16 years to accomplish. Pierre Trudeau left Canada in such an economic hole it took another 16 years to dig us out. Because this government's historic levels of secrecy, utter lack of transparency, and deceptive bookkeeping, Canadians don't know how deep this hole is. That's because more and more it appears as if this socialist coalition has adopted a kamikaze strategy. They know Canadians want to change. They know Canadians are tired of this corrupt, arrogant, preachy, self-righteous Prime Minister. They know no amount of new spending is going to improve their poll numbers. They know this, yet their strategy is damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead. The Socialist Coalition started us on a slow run to insolvency, but now they're in a full sprint. This reckless spending is not achieving positive results. The more they spend, the less Canadians can afford. Madam Speaker, before the Parliamentary Secretary rises to read Katie Telford's latest talking points, I just want to remind them the question I asked was not a partisan question, but a straightforward policy one. All the experts Liberals love to quote said, more spending fuels inflation. So I ask again, will this government cap spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule to bring down inflation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
Thanks, Madam Speaker, and thanks to the member opposite for, I think, the very entertaining diatribe that she went on. The member opposite claims that she's not being partisan, but every part of her comments today seemed like a partisan attack, and I know she specializes in conspiracy theories on her nightly news show, but that's okay. I will endeavor to try to answer her question. But before I do, maybe I'll just clarify that defense spending in Budget 2024, obviously the member hasn't taken the time yet to read the document, but it includes considerable increases to defense spending. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the work our government is doing to address affordability issues in Canada while continuing to responsibly manage our country's finances. First of all, I would like to remind my honourable colleague that Canada has the lowest deficit and net debt to GDP ratios in the G7, which is recognized by our AAA credit rating. Canadians know how important it is to responsibly manage a budget in the face of rising costs And that's exactly what we are doing. As noted by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, when she tabled the budget earlier this week, we are maintaining our fiscal anchor. Our federal debt to GDP ratio will continue to decline over the medium term. Madam Speaker, in Budget 2024, our government is moving forward with measures that foster the kind of economic growth that will enable every generation of Canadians to reach their full potential. For example, Budget 2024 includes many ambitious measures to address the housing crisis. We want to ensure that people, especially young people, are better able to pay their rent or mortgage. To do this, we're investing in building more rental apartments and more affordable housing from coast to coast to coast. We are topping up the Housing Accelerator Fund and making it easier for Canadian homeowners to add a basement suite or a laneway house so middle-class Canadians can be part of the housing solution too. For first-time homebuyers, we will be extending the maximum amortization period of a mortgage to 30 years on new builds, including condos, and we are also making changes to ensure that renters who pay on time can have that rent payment count towards their credit history when it comes time to get a mortgage. This means lower monthly payments and greater opportunity for young people to buy their first home. Madam Speaker, we are also moving forward with measures to make life in Canada cost less. Inflation is now way down and in fact now has been back within the Bank of Canada's target range for 3 months in a row. We said we would continue to invest in Canadians, reasonably manage our finances and control inflation, and that's exactly what we're doing. And we understand that many Canadians, especially younger people, need support, and that's why we're making transformational enhancements to Canada's social safety net. That social safety net is being increased through $10 a day childcare, through the Canadian Dental Care Plan, through a national drug insurance plan, and through now a national school food program, which I am very proud to see in the federal budget. These are just a few measures we're putting forward to help Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, this government's gaslighting is endless. If they were forced to pay the carbon tax on all that hot air, we could pay off their $2 trillion debt tomorrow. As these far-left radicals grow even more desperate, Canadians can expect a biblical-sized flood of misinformation and disinformation. Their favorite tactic will be the classic accusation in the mirror. They accuse everyone else of doing exactly the thing that they are doing. They'll shamelessly claim all we have are slogans. This from the party who's so infatuated with round numbers. Every environmental policy has the same 30 by 30 slogan. They said they'd reduce emissions 30% by 2030. They said they'd render 30% of Canada's land and seas unusable by 2030. Their Soviet-style car sales mandate goes even further, forcing 50% EVs by 2030. After 9 years, all they have are empty slogans, broken promises, and a mountain of debt. This Prime Minister and his socialist coalition are just not worth the cost.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Our government has a plan to drive the kind of economic growth that will ensure every generation of Canadians can reach their full potential. A plan to ensure that everyone gets a fair chance to build a good middle-class life in Canada. This government believes in investing in Canadians and creating economic growth, not cuts in austerity like the Conservatives. We're building a modern economy with jobs for the future and are investing today so that generations of tomorrow can have a fair shot at success. Canadians can count on our government to make life more affordable while continuing to manage our public finances responsibly, and that's what we're proposing in Budget 2024. It's about fairness for every generation and an economy that works for all Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.